Welcome back. Happy Saturday. In today's video, we'll be covering the latest updates with Bitcoin. We'll also be doing technical analysis of Bitcoin. What's the price really going to be? How high can Bitcoin go during this cycle? And what does this mean for companies like Strategy, MSTR, as well as the big three Bitcoin miners? Is now a time to buy, sell, or hold? We'll cover all of the predictions using technical analysis indicators. And if you're new to this channel, first off, I would really appreciate you hitting the like, subscribing for more related content. Let's begin, guys. First off, let's take a look at a post from CryptoJack in that he's saying Bitcoin is about to break from the bull flag pattern. Are you ready to change your life and become rich? So we see a bull flag being drawn out, current price with Bitcoin hovering around that 105,000. And we may very well have Bitcoin, break out and climb up to the next stair where it surpasses its all-time high and starts climbing into new price discovery range. Fiat Archive posts that President Trump says he selected a Federal Reserve chair and it will be announced very soon. So, what's really going to drive Bitcoin price up? The big print is coming. And like what we've heard from Saylor, he says that the first country that prints their own fiat money to buy Bitcoin is the country that wins. Is the United States, going to follow through on that trajectory that Saylor had mapped out? Bitcoin laws posted today in that Congressman Republican Tim Burchett, he introduced a House bill yesterday, June 6th, to codify President Trump's strategic Bitcoin reserve executive order. Now, we know Trump is in the presidency right now, Trump 2.0, but even after that, the next president up who tries to take away the SPR, that cannot happen. Only Congress can do so. So this is really bullish. This is going to solidify SBR, United States, as the digital asset stockpile. And we've heard Trump announce that his focus is to have the United States be the powerhouse of crypto and AI. BitStrategy posts, Metaplanet is proving why strategy cannot afford to wait around. The wolves are at the gate. We must get to 1 million Bitcoin as soon as possible. 1 million Bitcoin means, one Nakamoto. So that's going to be the focus that Saylor needs to, pay attention to. In fact, it's time we revise our targets. If Metaplanet is aiming for 210,000 Bitcoins by 2027, surely the only reasonable target for strategy is 2.1 million by 2027 too. 1% for them, 10% for MSTR. Pedal to the metal. Let's go. Definitely some bullish perspective from BitStrategy in that Saylor cannot stay complacent. Yes, while he's welcoming other companies to apply the Saylor strategy or the MSTR playbook, one thing to keep in mind is you can't stay complacent. The key is yes, you're partnering up with all these companies, but your focus, your laser sharp focus is to hodl as much Bitcoin as you can possibly get. Bitmaster posts today, MSTR bought 1% of the total Bitcoin supply in the last 7 months. So that doesn't mean that, MSTR should be resting or anything like that. MSTR should have pedal to the metal, continue to buy a Bitcoin. How is MSTR able to do that without, fully diluting, MSTR shareholders? So the interesting thing about strategy Saylor is he's developed different ways to acquire more and more money, and that's through the development of like Strike, Stride, and Strife. So you see with this how it works is, you have the 4D chess working together. Everything goes hand in hand. So we've seen the ATM convertible notes be used, by increasing the amount of shares through MSTR and now having the multiple levers to strike, strife, and stride. And that really appeases to different investors who want that monthly dividend payouts. So it's interesting in that, it attracts different investors with different, risk appetites. Some like that, monthly payouts, but this is how Sailor is able to acquire more and more Bitcoin without diluting, the company share through MSTR. So definitely bullish, and this is only going to allow for strategy to continue to suck up more money, tell that compelling story to acquire more money from investors and then be able to buy more Bitcoin to increase the Bitcoin per share, Bitcoin yield, and overall just, result in the share price to increase. Here's an interesting post, just more around the big three Bitcoin miners. So Riot, CleanSpark, and Mara, those are the top miners. So what was sent to the U.S. Department of Treasury to Scott Bessent is, the big time miners, they're basically talking about how there's a discrepancy with getting double tax. And now, there's already agreement with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, as well as the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, already seeing Bitcoin as a commodity rather than a security, or like, let's say, it's not a stock or a currency. So the fact that it's considered a commodity, that not be that when miners mine, they get taxed up front, and then when miners sell Bitcoin, they get taxed again. That shouldn't be the case. It should be treated as a one type of, tax upon selling or realizing the gains, upon, mining and selling the Bitcoin, not just mining, getting taxed, and selling, getting double taxed again. So this is very bullish, and I think this is going to go through as an approval because CFTC and the SEC has already redefined Bitcoin as a commodity rather than a security. So I think that's really going to push this towards really benefiting the mining sector. Here's an interesting post from Edge of Probability. So Riot formed an inverse head and shoulder, needs to break $10.41, then possible retest. Been stuck in this bull flag channel since May of 2023. So it's been years now. Will this be the breakout year for miners? And here's an interesting visual. So we see that inverse, head and shoulders back in September. We saw that run up during that, Trump announcement with presidency. And then since then, we've seen that bleed out, another inverse head and shoulders playing out. So definitely that resistance barrier, once we break through that, that 10, 40 range, we may very well have Riot, get off to the races. Cryptovichi posts Mara, eyes on the target, $80. Definitely very bullish with his goal here. The conviction that Mara is going to reach $80 in the year 2025. Ace of Trades, highly recommend following Ace of Trades as well. He's posting about Clean Spark. Let's read his take. After a bearish change of character in late February, price has been steadily grinding higher. This week's candle closed above the POC, a constructive sign. The line in the sand for a parabolic breakout sits at $13.32. On the downside, a break below $8 would mark a bearish change of character and shift momentum back to the bears. So definitely some huge upside line in the sand of $13. I do think that in the month of June, we may very well break through that. And there's some people who are thinking that in June, we may very well get to that $24 range on the bullish side. Let's take a look at Bitcoin technical analysis. So we're looking at the daily candle. One of the key things I want to point out is as we look at the daily candle, we see that the moving average, the 50 to 200 day moving average, so the 50-day moving average is represented in orange. We saw that crossing back in like 2024 October, and then we saw that the crossing between the 50 to 200 day moving average, which indicates a bearish activity. I mean, that happened April, but then what had just happened since? May 22 is when we saw that golden cross, which what happened when we saw that golden cross, back in October, we've seen the price go from like 63,000 to, reaching all-time high of 110,000. So the fact that we just reached that, that golden cross, that really just shows that there's potential. I mean, that crossing was at around the 113,000. So when at the time when the last crossing happened is 63,000. So can we get to, 200,000? I think that it's very well possible if it plays out the same way that we've seen with the prior golden crossing. But I think that in the month of June, we may very well get somewhere around this 120, 140,000. That may extend into July onward. But I do believe that as we get into this new range, 120, 140, we'll get a slight pullback consolidation before that next run up into that 200,000 in the year 2025. So definitely some bullish activity, and key thing is relative strength. Even though we saw like a relative strength above 70, where it currently is right now is 53. So definitely healthy sign of confidence with buying and selling. But I do think that RSI is going to continue to tick up as we head into the bull cycle. Looking at Bitcoin on the daily candle, so more of a near term, perspective on a day-to-day candle change. We see, this bull flag being played out. I mean, this is a key thing. We want to see this in this, bull wedge. We've seen, it go up to 112,000, and since May 2022, it's been about 2 weeks now or almost 3 weeks where Bitcoin has just been hovering in this wedge flag, volumes decreasing, but I think that this is really going to be prime for Bitcoin to break out. We want to see this after a gradual run up for it to, climb up to the next ladder. So it's just stair stepping up to the next level. Think of it as a ladder. Let's take a look at MSTR technical analysis. So what we're looking at is on the weekly chart. So we've seen this huge bull flag being drawn out when MSTR went up 400%, since uh, the end of the year 2020 or 2024. It went up, 400%. At one point, it went up to like 800% in November, but then they had a pullback towards the end of the year. But one of the key things is it's been just hovering, almost like half a year in this, consolidation phase. And, it was until recently when Bitcoin got out of that 75K back into that 100,000 barrier. It's when we see that climb back up. However, a lot of investors of strategy are wondering, why is it that strategy, like for a whole month now, it's just been, like consolidating. We see that strategy is just, hovering in this, this bull pennant flag. And I do think that we're just going to break out on the weekly. We see that, because we broke out of that, MACD bearish convergence, we're just going to see more and more green vertical candles on the MACD. Key thing is on the moving average on the 9 to 21 moving average. We've seen that crossing back in May on the weekly. So I do think that because we just had that crossing, we're showing signs of bullish activities to come. And I do think that strategy, when Bitcoin, has that price discovery point, strategy is going to get to that 1,000 range in the year 2025. Let's take a look at a Bitcoin miner RIOT technical analysis. We're looking at RIOT on the weekly charts. So what we're seeing is relative strength is, gradually picking up from that huge oversold situation around that, inverse head time point around $6. We also see that coupled with bearish activity on the MACD. But what's happened since we see this MACD crossing, we're beginning to see some upticks on the MACD. I do foresee that over the next several months, we will continue to see MACD on the weekly charts be established, with the volcano being drawn out with green verticals. But just key thing that we're looking at is because MACD is reversing, relative strength is gradually increasing. And because we see this, this inverse head and shoulders forming along with this bullish engulfing pattern shown, we're getting close to that level one tier resistance, of 1027. We saw it break out at $10, but I do think that, come next week, we may very well see this, start running up very fast. I do think that in the year 2025, things can go, very banana-like with the Bitcoin miners because it's been beaten down so much. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing runs up to like $40 or $80. Anything can happen. It's been beat down for so long. Mara is the biggest Bitcoin miner. I mean, they're overall fundamentals, their hash rate is like at that level no other miners can get to. They have a HODL of like close to 50,000 Bitcoins. In fact, they mine 950 Bitcoins, just with May production numbers. We're also seeing an inverse head and shoulders form. We're also seeing that on the technicals, Mara broke out of this bull flag. We're also seeing that the MACD is beginning to show signs of a reversal along with RSI picking up. So similar deal on the weekly. I do foresee that we're going to start seeing, vertical green candles be drawn out with the MACD. And because we're beginning to see that moving average, the 9 to 21 weekly moving average, the orange is, getting very close to crossing the green. I think that come next week, we'll see that blue intersection be established on the weekly. But key thing is, tier one, $17. We saw that cross, May 12th. I think that we're gonna break through that, come next week. Where it currently is, definitely undervalued, $15. We've seen it previously at $30. When these miners run, they run. We've seen what happened with Mara in the last bull cycle, going from like $3 to $80. Anything can happen. We saw what Cryptovichi posted, $80 upside with Mara, and I wouldn't be surprised once that happens. Let's take a look at another Bitcoin miner. That is CleanSpark, a pure Bitcoin miner. Right now, they're ramping up their hash rate, getting up to that goal of like towards end of June, getting to 50 exahash per second. That's huge, and that allows them to mine huge numbers of Bitcoin every month. In fact, each day they're mining like 23 Bitcoins every day. But eventually, they're going to ramp that up. Every hour of the day, they will likely have like one Bitcoin or even more. So that's huge numbers. We're also seeing an inverse head and shoulders be formed. MACD is reversing as well, because the miners have been beat down for so long. You've seen it with the MACD bearish convergence here. I think that we're going to see that crossing, into that tier one of 1095, June timeframe. I wouldn't be surprised for it to break through this mid-tier $15. And can it get to that prior resistance of $25 in June? Even if it's not in June, I think that July, August, even through the rest of 2025, CleanSpark can just have a significant, bull run. That's my takeaway. I hope you enjoyed an overall perspective on what my predictions are with Bitcoin strategy and the big three miners, as well as sharing with you the updates around what's going on with the Bitcoin sector and strategy, along with the treasury companies out there and Mara, Riot, and CleanSpark. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit the like, subscribe for more related content. Thank you guys. Have a great week.